At the dawn of the 19th century, New York was a city standing between two worlds: the fading memory of its colonial past and the rising force of industrial modernity. In 1800, fewer than 80,000 people lived here, clustered at the southern tip of Manhattan. The streets were narrow and muddy, lit by oil lamps and echoing with the sound of iron-rimmed wheels on cobblestone. Wooden houses leaned against brick warehouses, and church steeples rose above the smoke of coal fires. But already, something powerful stirred. The harbor, one of the finest in the world, was filled with ships from every corner of the Atlantic. Masts bristled against the gray sky. Vessels from London, Lisbon, Havana, and the Caribbean, bringing sugar, rum, and textiles. On their decks, immigrants stood shoulder to shoulder, clutching trunks and prayers, their eyes fixed on the promise of a new life. The opening of the Erie Canal in 1825 changed everything. It connected New York to the Great Lakes, turning it into the commercial hub of America. Grain from the Midwest, lumber from the frontier, and cotton from the South poured into its docks. Wealth followed. Merchants, bankers, and speculators filled the counting houses downtown, while laborers swarmed the wharves. The hum of trade became the heartbeat of the city. By 1850, the population passed 500,000. By 1900, more than 3 million people crowded its tenements and avenues. They came from Ireland, Germany, Italy, Poland, China, each bringing their language, food, and faith. English mingled with Yiddish. German songs drifted from taverns, and Italian prayers echoed from crowded churches. But the city's growth was not gentle. Tenements rose like brick cages, packed with families. Disease spread through damp basements and unpaved streets. Fires, poverty, and pollution marked everyday life. Yet through hardship, hope burned fiercely. New York was a crucible, melting cultures, ambitions, and dreams into something entirely new. As the century unfolded, the skyline began to climb. Gas lamps lined the avenues, then streetcars, then electric lights. Bridges stretched over rivers, railways thundered overhead, and the first steel towers reached toward the clouds. In the harbor, a statue rose, Liberty, holding a torch to the world. This was 19th century New York, a city of contradictions, brutal and beautiful, cruel and full of promise, a place where millions came to be reborn. Morning in 19th century New York began before the sun rose. The city stirred in layers. First the laborers, then the merchants, and finally the wealthy. At dawn, the narrow streets of the Lower East Side filled with footsteps, shouts, and the creak of carts. The smell of coal smoke and fresh bread drifted through the chill air, mixing with the damp scent of the river. In the tenement houses, hundreds of families lived side by side in rooms barely large enough for a bed and a stove. Walls were thin, air was scarce, and water came from a single pump in the courtyard. Toilets were shared, disease was common, and privacy was rare. Yet life was relentless. Mothers rose early to boil coffee and porridge. Fathers laced up worn boots for the docks or factories. Children hurried into the streets to sell newspapers, shine shoes, or carry water for pennies. Outside, push carts lined the sidewalks. Vendors shouted in half a dozen languages: fresh apples, hot bread, fish from the harbor. Irish women bargained for potatoes, Italian mothers for onions and herbs, Jewish families for salted herring. The clatter of iron wheels and the calls of street hawkers created a symphony unique to the city, noisy, chaotic, alive. Breakfast was simple: black coffee, a crust of bread, maybe a boiled egg if luck allowed. In wealthier homes uptown, the day began differently. Servants lit fires and polished silver before the family descended from carpeted staircases. Breakfast tables offered eggs, fruit, and buttered toast, while carriages waited outside polished brownstones to carry gentlemen to their offices and ladies to markets or visits. For the growing middle class, clerks, teachers, artisans, mornings were measured and modest. They lived in small but tidy row houses, reading the newspaper by lamplight, speaking with pride of education, thrift, and respectability. Many dreamed of rising further, of sending their children to school, owning a shop, escaping the noise of the slums. The streets themselves were living veins. Horses pulled omnibuses and carts through mud and manure. Street sweepers worked with shovels. Lamplighters snuffed the last gas lights as the sun climbed. Ferries crossed the rivers, carrying workers from Brooklyn and Jersey. The rhythm of the city quickened with each hour. Blacksmiths hammering, bells ringing, newspapers flapping in the wind. Despite the struggle, mornings carried a strange energy, a belief that something could change, that this day might be the one to bring fortune or freedom. In New York, the sun rose on both misery and hope, and every soul, rich or poor, stepped into the streets chasing a future they could almost see. If the soul of 19th century New York was its people, its heartbeat was labor. From dawn until long after dusk, the city hummed with work. The clang of hammers, the rumble of carts, the shouts of dock workers, the hiss of steam. Every neighborhood had its trade, every block its craft, every family a struggle for survival. Along the East River, ships lined the docks like steel forests. Sailors unloaded crates of grain, barrels of whiskey, and bales of cotton. Longshoremen carried the weight of global commerce on their backs, their muscles hardened by endless lifting, their hands torn by ropes. The air was thick with the smell of salt, coal, and sweat. A single day's pay might vanish on rent or bread, yet they returned every morning, driven by necessity. Deeper into the city, factories and workshops filled the air with smoke and clatter. Garment makers stitched coats by gaslight. Cigar rollers shaped tobacco on worn tables, and machinists forged the metal bones of a new industrial world. Women worked long hours in textile mills, laundries, and sewing rooms, earning a fraction of men's wages. Children swept floors, carried tools, and fetched water. Many never saw a classroom. The workday stretched 12, sometimes 14 hours, 6 days a week, with Sunday the only rest. There were no safety laws. Fires and accidents were common. A broken arm could mean starvation, and illness could destroy a family. Yet even in hardship, skill and pride endured. Blacksmiths, carpenters, and cobblers honed crafts passed down for generations. Downtown, a different kind of labor thrived. In counting houses and banks, clerks inked ledgers. Traders speculated on ships and railroads, and merchants studied the tides of global trade. The Erie Canal and new railways turned the city into a vast marketplace. By mid-century, New York was the financial capital of America, its fortunes rising with the pulse of commerce. Innovation reshaped the city's rhythm. Horse-drawn streetcars carried workers uptown. By the 1870s, elevated railways rattled above the avenues, moving thousands through clouds of smoke. Gas lamps gave way to electric lights, and the hum of machines replaced the clop of hooves. The skyline climbed higher each decade, steel beams rising toward the clouds. Amid progress, resistance grew. Workers formed unions, the Knights of Labor, trade guilds, and mutual aid societies, demanding shorter hours, safer conditions, and fair pay. Strikes swept through factories and docks. Some ended in violence, others in small victories that laid the groundwork for modern rights. For the rich, work meant investment and power. For the poor, it meant exhaustion and endurance. Yet together, they built the foundations of a city that would one day define the modern world. Every brick laid, every beam forged, every stitch sewn, all part of the great machine called New York. No city in the 19th century reflected the world like New York. It was a living mosaic, built by millions who arrived from distant shores, each carrying a language, a faith, a dream. Between 1820 and 1900, more than 12 million immigrants entered the United States through its harbors, and most first set foot on the docks of Manhattan. The earliest waves came from Ireland and Germany. The Irish fled famine in the 1840s. Ships packed with families weak from hunger, their only possessions a trunk and a prayer. They settled in crowded neighborhoods like 5 Points, taking hard labor jobs, digging canals, paving streets, hauling coal. They filled the police force, the fire brigades, and the Catholic churches that became centers of hope in a harsh city. The Germans arrived with skills. Brewers, carpenters, printers. They built beer halls and schools and introduced music festivals and Sunday parks. Their neighborhoods echoed with the sound of accordions and the smell of sausages and fresh bread. Later came the Italians, crowding into tenements on Mulberry Street. They brought olive oil, garlic, songs, and strong family bonds. Men worked in construction, women in laundries and kitchens. Their children sold fruit from push carts and shined shoes on Broadway. Churches like Our Lady of Pompeii became the soul of the community. Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe arrived fleeing persecution. Tailors, cobblers, and shopkeepers settling in the Lower East Side. They built synagogues in narrow buildings, studied the Torah by lamplight, and spoke a blend of Yiddish and English that soon filled the streets. Their sweatshops produced the clothing that dressed America. From China, men arrived to build railroads and work in laundries, facing prejudice and exclusion. From Scandinavia, sailors and shipwrights came to the docks. From the Caribbean, workers joined the city's kitchens and markets. Every culture left its mark in recipes, songs, festivals, and street names. The result was a world within a city. On a single block, one might hear Irish ballads, German hymns, Italian laughter, and Hebrew prayers. Markets sold pierogi beside bagels, pasta beside sauerkraut. Church steeples rose beside synagogue domes. Taverns stood next to bakeries and temples. But life was not easy. Immigrants faced poverty, discrimination, and brutal landlords. Signs reading, "No Irish need apply," or "Jews unwelcome," were common. Fights broke out between gangs formed along ethnic lines. Yet solidarity grew too. Mutual aid societies, churches, and community halls offered food, jobs, and friendship. Despite hardship, they built the backbone of the city. They paved the roads, raised the bridges, lit the lamps, and filled the schools with their children. By the end of the century, New York had become a global crossroads, a city where no single culture ruled, but all coexisted in a fragile, vibrant harmony. To walk its streets was to walk the world. After long hours of labor and hardship, New Yorkers of the 19th century sought refuge in the city's many forms of entertainment. Even in poverty, people carved out moments of laughter, music, and joy, small sparks of light in a life often shadowed by exhaustion. In the bustling heart of Manhattan, Broadway glowed with gas lamps and the chatter of crowds. Theaters and music halls lined the streets, offering performances for every taste and class. At the grand venues, audiences in fine dress watched operas, ballets, and Shakespearean dramas. Elsewhere, cheaper houses hosted vaudeville shows, a mix of comedy, song, magic, and slapstick that drew workers and immigrants seeking escape. The stage became a mirror of the city, chaotic, diverse, and full of energy. In the Bowery, entertainment was rough and loud. Beer halls and dance saloons echoed with fiddles and laughter. Men drank ale by the gallon. Women danced in swirling skirts. Arguments flared and friendships were forged. The Bowery's lights burned brightest after dark, its streets filled with the pulse of working-class life. Every neighborhood carried its own rhythm. In Irish taverns, fiddlers played reels and jigs while patrons sang along. German beer gardens hosted brass bands and Sunday gatherings. Italian immigrants filled courtyards with the scent of roasted chestnuts and the melody of mandolins. Jewish families celebrated holy days with song and storytelling, weaving old-world traditions into the fabric of a new home. For the city's growing middle class, leisure meant refinement. Reading clubs, art galleries, public lectures, and church socials. They strolled along Broadway or the Battery, watching ships in the harbor. In 1858, Central Park opened, a revolutionary idea, a green refuge for all classes. Families picnicked under elm trees, children rolled hoops across open lawns, and couples rode in carriages along winding paths. For a few hours, the chaos of the city faded into birdsong and breeze. The wealthy hosted grand balls, dinner parties, and charity galas in glittering parlors. Men gathered in exclusive clubs to smoke cigars and debate politics, while women attended teas and recitals. Music from pianos and string quartets filled brownstone mansions lit by chandeliers. For the poor, joy was simpler, but no less real. A game of stickball in the alley, a song sung on a stoop, a dance in a crowded room. Sundays brought church bells, community meals, and moments of peace. Evenings might end with a beer, a prayer, or a story told by candlelight. Books and newspapers became companions in every class. Penny novels offered adventures of cowboys and detectives. Serialized stories filled the minds of factory girls and clerks. Public libraries and lectures spread knowledge, reminding people that life was more than toil. In a city of struggle, entertainment was survival, a defiance against despair, a declaration that even in hardship, the human spirit demanded music, laughter, and light. When the sun dipped behind the rooftops, New York revealed another face, a city wrapped in fog and flame, glowing with gaslight, humming with danger and desire. Night in the 19th century was a world of its own, filled with shadows, secrets, and the restless pulse of a place that never slept. As dusk fell, lamplighters moved through the streets, lighting one gas lamp after another. Their flames cast soft halos on cobblestones slick with rain and horse manure. The day's noise softened into murmurs, the clip of hooves, the whisper of carriages, the cry of vendors closing shop. But beneath the calm, another rhythm stirred. In the crowded tenements of the Lower East Side and Five Points, families gathered in dim rooms, eating simple suppers by candlelight. Children fell asleep to the sound of street fiddles or distant shouts. Mothers sewed by the glow of oil lamps. Fathers washed the soot from their hands and spoke in tired whispers about the next day's work. Outside, alleys filled with laughter, arguments, and the haunting notes of harmonicas. But not all was peace. The night belonged too to gangs, the Bowery Boys, the Dead Rabbits, the 40 Thieves, young men hardened by poverty and pride. They fought over turf with clubs and knives, their names whispered in fear. Police patrolled in twos, their boots echoing down narrow lanes. But corruption often blurred the line between law and crime. In saloons and taverns, the city's heartbeat quickened. Men gathered over mugs of ale and whiskey, playing cards, singing songs, and forgetting their troubles for a few precious hours. In smoky back rooms, gamblers threw dice, and whispers of politics and revolution filled the air. Some drank to celebrate, others to forget. Elsewhere, brothels and dance halls glimmered under dim chandeliers. The Bowery's music spilled into the streets, pianos, fiddles, and laughter mingling with the occasional cry of despair. Moral reformers called the city a den of sin. But for many, these places were the only escape from endless labor and loneliness. Uptown, the nights were quieter, though never still. In brownstone parlors, the wealthy hosted dinners and recitals. Servants cleared silver trays as laughter echoed through velvet-draped halls. Carriages rolled through gaslit avenues, their wheels whispering across smooth stone. Over it all, the city's lights shimmered against the dark, a constellation born of fire and smoke. From the Brooklyn ferries to the Harlem lanes, New York glowed like a restless star. Yet even in the darkest corners, hope endured. Churches opened their doors to the poor and hungry. Mission halls offered bread, hymns, and lessons in reading. Neighbors watched over one another. Mothers sang lullabies into the night. The city breathed, weary, wounded, but alive. New York's nights were a mirror of its soul, part dream, part nightmare, a place where danger and compassion walked side by side. To live in 19th century New York was to stand in the furnace of history, a place where the past and future collided, where the promise of a new world was tested every single day by the weight of survival. This city was not gentle. It was loud, filthy, and merciless. Its streets overflowed with mud, smoke, and ambition. It demanded everything from those who came, their strength, their sweat, their faith. But in return, it offered a chance to rise, to belong, to shape a destiny beyond birth or class. In a single day, you could walk from the polished mansions of Fifth Avenue to the crowded alleys of Five Points, from the echoing halls of the Opera House to the raucous laughter of a Bowery saloon. Each corner told a different story, each voice carried a different dream, and together they created the living symphony of America's greatest experiment. By the century's end, the skyline had changed forever. Steel replaced wood. Electric lights banished the dark. Elevated railways thundered above the streets, and the Brooklyn Bridge stretched like a monument to human will. And in 1886, a colossal figure rose in the harbor, the Statue of Liberty, torch held high, welcoming the tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. She became the city's soul, a promise carved in copper and flame. But the true builders of New York were not the architects or bankers. They were the immigrants, the laborers, the mothers and fathers who laid bricks, stitched garments, scrubbed floors, and dreamed of better lives for their children. Their hands shaped the streets. Their songs filled the night. Their hopes became the heartbeat of a nation. In the sweat of the docks, in the shadows of the tenements, in the laughter of saloons and the prayers of churches, the idea of America took form. A land where identity was forged not by birth, but by effort, not by blood, but by belief. By 1900, New York stood as a beacon, the largest, loudest, most diverse city in the country, a place of endless struggle and boundless possibility. It was the mirror of humanity itself, flawed yet hopeful, chaotic yet beautiful, always changing, always alive. To live there was to know hardship, but also to taste the thrill of freedom. It was to wake each morning to the clang of work and the whisper of dreams, to walk streets filled with strangers who were all in their own way searching for the same thing, a place to belong. This was 19th century New York, the cradle of the modern world, where smoke and song, struggle and hope wove together into the first true city of America's heart.